Hello, and welcome to the Still Standing series. I'm your host, Coach Violet Coots, and I'm happy to have my special guest with me today, Ben Hinton. And I'm a Christian life coach, equipping and empowering individuals to live in their true identity and be who God created them to be, living in the freedom Christ died to give us. I'd love for you to grab my free biblical affirmation cards so you can start renewing your mind and finding that freedom. And if you're feeling stuck in any area of your life, schedule a free breakthrough session with me. The link will be in the show descriptions. Hello, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. Good morning.
It is so great to have you here this morning and looking forward to what God has laid on your heart to share with us. So, but if you will, just tell us a little bit about yourself and before we get into your testimony that you want to share.
Yes, thank you. So, my name is Ben, and I am a child of God, and I get to be a husband, a father. I love to run. I'm a coach. I'm an author as a coach, a Christian coach, and a business partner as well. So, a lot of things that I get to be because of Christ in me. My wife and I, we live in Pittsburgh, just outside of Pittsburgh, PA. We have two wonderful girls who are my I guess, co-guests today. They might pop in a little bit. We have two
Okay.
daughters, and we have two dogs as well. And um, that's currently where I am, the position I'm at right now in life.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And that's perfectly fine. Yeah, before we got recording, I saw one of them, so that'll be no problem at all. They're sweet. Uh, but yeah, so just share with us what what God has laid on your heart to share with us today, and take it away.
Yeah. So, what God's laid on my heart today, actually, literally today, this morning, um, I have so as an author and speaker, I'm a coach, author, speaker, coach in the faith-based space. And because I believe, number one, I believe lives are transformed. We share our faith, not push agendas. And I believe, when it comes to business as adults, and whether we are an entrepreneur or whether we work 9 to 5, whatever space that we are working in, I think alignment is important. And I mean, it's everything. So with that being said, it's God first, goal second. And this morning, what was really laid on my heart this morning, early on, is I had a video call today with my business partner, and we just launched something called Christian Entertainment Network. And she had a presentation she was sharing today, and I joined her as a not as a primary guest, but listening to her presentation. And she was talking about distractions. And one of the things that really stood out to me this morning was, and it related to me and what's on my heart, is distractions are the enemy's weapons, right? And there's many forms of distractions, many forms of deception. And one of the things, it's just amazing how God works this way when He wants to get your attention, when He wants to lay something on your heart. There's times maybe it'll be in a whisper, but then there's other times that it's like, okay, it's right there, right in front of you. So it's loud and clear. And my two daughters who are home with me today. So with distractions, one of the things that Sherry was talking about was multitasking. And I don't know if you've ever heard this acronym for busy, but busy, the acronym for it stands for being under Satan's yoke. And so with distractions, that's multitasking, right? And so with being obedient is focusing, right? Focus on the effort before the results. So we never get to the results that we're meant to get to. And when I say results, I mean our purpose, because we're distracted and we're not being obedient. So after that call with Sherry, and everyone woke up and was kind of moving around and things like that, me and my daughters, what do you know? I was multitasking. I was distracted. I was in our dining room in where I'm a guest at today for this episode, and I had a bowl in my left hand that had some milk and some breakfast of mine, and I was backing up to get ready to go to the kitchen, but mentally I was distracted and I was multitasking. So when I went to get up, I tripped, and when I tripped, then I fell down, bumped my elbow, and things got spilled, and so I got very frustrated very fast. And my 10-year-old, who happened to be in the room, well, she then reacted to my reaction. And so she was probably affected about it more than I was, a little, maybe little bruise or something like that physically, right? And then it was like, okay, God's saying right there, distractions. So to help her, so that, because we're responsible for how we respond. And also one of the distractions the enemy's going to do, right, is it wants us to shrink. It wants us to, crouch in terms of, the fetal position, and the poor, the woe is me thing. And so I did that for a second with my daughter, but how I react is how, she might respond. So I took that moment and I was like, God, that was loud and clear. So I, got up, I gathered myself, and then as she was kind of crying, tried to embrace her, and then we had a moment there. And one of the first things that came out of my mouth was, listen, Psalms 46:10 says, be still and know that I am God. And I said, this was not your fault. I am, multitasking right now. I'm going a whole bunch of different directions. So let's let this be a lesson. And then my 5-year-old came in, and she wanted a part of the group hug. But those are the sort of the seeds that I hope get planted, so that, when my daughter, especially my 10-year-old, the older is an adult and grows up, that she'll remember these lessons, right? And not the losses in terms of those moments that she felt, um, less than, right? Or she felt like there was an agenda, or her worth was kind of affected. And because they're at this age, my kids and so many other kids, and with education and teachers going back to school and things like that, these are such vulnerable years. So yeah, that's what that God was placing on my heart today. Literally, got a message about distractions this morning, and then literally was put to the test right away. And that's the other emphasis, is there's tests and there's temptations. So it is so easy, for us to go the route of the temptations route, and that'll also affect our purpose, and could potentially lead us either to remain in panic, or to take the path of panic. And I truly believe that panic, is pitfall, or panic is purpose pitfall. Right. So if we stay in panic, or if we choose to panic rather than pivot in the Lord, then there's some pretty big implications of that decision or that reaction.
Right. That's some good stuff. That's some good stuff. And I like what you said about, he gave you a lesson, or he was giving talking to you, and I think I've got this right. And then immediately you had, or almost immediately, but you was in a situation of, putting that into place and into practice, and say, okay, here it is. And experiencing, I think one of the things that has been on my heart lately has to, experiencing God. It's not theory. We're experiencing what we're reading, the things that we read. It's not just the theory of it. It's, we're actually, we experience this. And I think it's great though that you took that opportunity then to turn around and teach, have that teaching moment, with your daughter, and just, and teaching them, and stuff. That's wonderful. And I never had heard that, the busy, would you say, being under Satan's yoke?
Yeah, yeah, being under Satan's yoke, and that's a quote that really stood out to me. So I'm a member of the C Suites for Christ Speakers Bureau, and the founder of C Suites for Christ, is also a speaker as well. And he, in a talk, had mentioned, and I heard him say this. I'd never heard it. And what really kind of stood out to me and was really planted on my heart with that, because I use it often, and want to give him his credit and his influence on me for that, because what really connected for me there was, we want to be productive, right? And we think that multitasking is being productive, but we get so caught up in that lie, that deception, in that small kind of window of, again, one direction or the other. And we might think we're being productive, but we need to evaluate, like, who am I being productive for, right?
Mm,
Am I being productive for who I am, right? Or what he wants me to do, meaning the devil, the enemy. So that really stood out to me, right? We want to make sure that we're focused on the effort. And if we can do that, we're being productive more so than being busy, so that we can work smarter, not harder. So I'm really glad that resonated with you, because it's always, resonated with me for sure.
Yeah, no, that is so good. That is so good. Uh, so now, um, so how long have you walked with the Lord? How long have you, is that kind of been, hey, I grew up, I grew up in Christianity. I was raised in church, or, was you raised in church, or did your relationship come later, or how did that come around, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so my relationship, with Christ in the Lord, the deepened relationship and connection came later. When I was growing up, my mom was a single parent. She was in the Protestant, she was a Presbyterian, and we would go to church some. She was a single parent, so going to church was hard, from a couple different factors. Because I know, she's home on the weekends, usually growing up on Sundays. But we would go to church some, but not always. But when she was growing up, so my grandma was, I want to say Presbyterian, and they had several kids. So my mom had some siblings. So when they were born, my grandfather and my grandma were like, "Hey, these children are going to be raised Presbyterian, and then these children are going to be raised Catholic, because that's what my grandfather's faith was." So my mom and I moved to Pittsburgh, where I currently reside and have since I moved here in third grade. And when I moved here in third grade, I was around my grandparents and family a lot, because my mom was a single mom. So that's when I started really going to church on a regular basis, and it was really my grandfather who instilled, was the beginning of my faith in planting the seeds for my relationship with Christ. Now, when we went to church on a weekly basis, and growing up, you don't always want to go to church Sunday, and you kind of complain about it a little bit and just don't understand it. But God, the Word, you go to Sunday school, but planting the seeds, right, and the growth of that sometimes just takes longer than for one person than another. And I'm so thankful for him my grandfather looking back about going to church, and he was what got me to church. So, but when we were going to church growing up, we switched. We used to go to Catholic church, for a while, and where he grew up in church when he was a kid, because he grew up in the small town that we had lived. But then there were other times that we went to other churches. And so the kind of uniqueness out of that was me getting to see God in all the churches. And
Yeah.
over time, I think now that really resonates with me, that, faith is in Christ. And, religion and faith to me are two different things.
Yes.
So, and I got to experience that firsthand. So when I was older, and getting to be close to, my late 20s, I sustained a traumatic brain injury when I was 26. And so after the brain injury, that's when my relationship with Christ really grew. And prior to when I was 26, I knew God, but I didn't have the relationship with God. And to me, that's a huge, huge important factor to differentiate with our walk with the Lord. Because for the first 26 years of my life, right, again, being busy, we talked about that acronym, being busy under Satan's yoke, and we talked about distractions. I was trying to take God where I wanted to go, into my late 20s. My mom
Yeah.
was a single mom, and so I had these dreams planted. I say that with air quotes, but I had, seeds that were planted, but they were really agendas. And so when I was 26, after my brain injury, that was my moment, of the wilderness. And the wilderness being that's where I was lost and found. And that's was became the transition to my transformation. One of my favorite verses is Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, "Do not be conformed by the patterns of this world, but rather renewed by the transformation of your mind." Or rather be renewed by the transformation of your mind. And so what happened for me was that after my brain injury, I was stuck in the wilderness of wanting things to be like they were before I was broken, before my injury. And that was very similar to the Israelites, being in the wilderness and coming from slavery, and then being brought or taken to the promised land where they could rely on God. And so after the brain injury, I finally had to rely on God and surrender over time that, hey, I'm going where you want me to go rather than, me taking you where I want to go. So then with that, over time, that the worst day became the best day of my life. And so that's kind of the trying to think of the word here, but the beauty in it,
Yeah. Yeah.
the 2020, if you will, or just moment of clarity. So now, I always was walking with Christ, and I think people don't realize that they are walking with Christ too. They just don't recognize him, right? They just didn't haven't accepted him, and they just don't understand yet. But he's with them, and he's so patient. And
Yeah.
so when and you have the alignment and the heart posture, and it just completes your life and allows you to see from the lens of grace and truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote down, we talked about uh, that deepened relationship, and and I can relate to that, and I think a lot of people do. We start out one way, and like you said, he's always with us, and and even if we've grown up with him, then even that we get to that to a certain point, and different circumstances in our lives, I think, points us there. But then where it's like, okay, now let's deepen that. Let's go deeper with him, and everything. So I liked how you said that deepened relationship with him and stuff. So, but yeah, so that's good. That's good. And it's good how you again, I'm just so impressed, even before when we talked before this recording, and just talking about teaching the children, and getting those seeds and getting them rooted and grounded, in his word and his ways and everything. And I think that's just so important as
Yeah,
well. So
it
awesome.
is. And I have a there in the background. I have so my I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, two daughters, and one of the things for me that is really helps me too in my walk with the Lord now is just that constant daily reminder that yes, I am a parent, but first I'm a child of God. And so that allows me to be present as a father when it's hard to be present. When you might just want to escape as a parent, you get frustrated, right? With you're wearing a label as a mom or a dad or whatnot. But when you can realize that you're a child of God, that really also strengthens, in my opinion, in my experience, my relationship with my children, because we are going to butt heads, but it's a growing pains. So I'm blessed because of my walk with the Lord now, where I'm at, right? I think I'm a better parent than I would have been even if I didn't sustain, the traumatic brain injury and the alignment of walking with the Lord. Because having the brain injury and some of the setbacks reminds me of who I am, right? And getting back to the foundation and the root. So, and having that childlike curiosity. So I really try with my kids so that we can teach each other, so that I'm not talking through them, right? And they're not, afraid to talk to me. It's we're on the same page that like I'm a child of God and so are you. Yes, I'm your parent and that's my title, right? And titles are important because they help us with a lot of things, but it's putting the mission before the position. And
Mm,
so there are moments that with me as well as any other parent, and that we can get frustrated with our kids, vice versa. But this is allowing us, thanks to God, to be able to, with what He does with us and walk with us, that we can just be aligned together, and that just really helps to make it full circle all around.
yeah. That's good. That's good. So, I like to ask my guests, like, have you had a like a life verse, over the years? Sorry,
Yeah, life verse. My life verse, without a doubt, is 2 Timothy 1:7. For God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but rather a spirit of power, love, and self-control. And the reason that's my life verse is, and it's funny because it's grown as my life verse. So probably around 2014, our church pastor, he had given me that verse when we were talking, and that was a foundational and became the foundational verse and life verse for me, because when I read that, for God did not give us a spirit of timidity. Having a brain injury as a young adult, right? That was the most timidity that I carried around, and the labels that I lived in. So reading that verse, it was a moment of, wait a second. So I have a choice. Like I have a choice to live in fear. You know, and then it says, but rather a spirit of power, love, and self-control. So what's changed for me at that life verse over time is deepening that just in that verse and that relationship with that verse. Because one of the things that I'm kind of getting to be known for with my phrases and acronyms is I tell people all the time, pivot, don't panic.
Mm,
And when it says, but rather a spirit of power, love, and self control, and not just this verse, but a lot of verses will say the word rather.
yeah,
So when I hear the word rather with the word and I read it, that's my pivot moment. So for
yeah,
me to have the choice, right? I get to, I don't have to. So I don't have to live with a spirit of timidity. I can choose to lay it down and right pick up the spirit of power, love, and self control, and be the lamp to many. So that's why, as in a context, it's my life verse and continues to grow as my life verse as well.
wow, that's good. I like that. That's when you talked about the pivoting and everything and stuff. So, and that you're right, we have that choice, but uh, you've just given so many different nuggets today. I like
Thank
just
you.
in our short time that we've talked here. I'm like, oh, I'm just picking up so many different things from just the things that you're sharing about your life and where you are, where some things that God has brought you from through and stuff. But yeah, pivot, don't panic. I like that. So that's good, and I'll probably now as I read and I see the word rather, I'll probably also remember that as well. That hey, this is pivot. Let's pivot on this thing. So that's so good. Uh,
Yes.
it's neat how those little things though just and it's something how little things though can make such an impact.
That's you hit that one right on because life's in the details. And I mean it's incredible what the little things will do, because sometimes, right, the deception's little, right? Because it's not always going to be a big thing. You like we hear all the time, one cheeseburger doesn't cause a heart attack. Right? So it's that compound effect, and
Yeah.
it works for us or against us. So when you see details, and that's also discipline, right? And that's why we have to be obedient daily.
Yeah.
It's not being obedience once. That there's that saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. It's not eat 7 apples on Sunday. In fact, if you did, it would probably give you a lot of problems. So it's just daily. But again, that's distractions, and that's what's hard about it.
Yeah.
And that's also why we need to stay in the word of the Lord. And I'm really thankful that you enjoyed the but rather, because just that and the idea of pivoting really allows me, and I hope encourages others to slow down when it comes to reading the word. Because sometimes just that pivot versus panic. Like sometimes we are so. Someone once not once but recently mentioned about we are conditioned to what we see. And what do we see? Well, we see panic, right? Whether we realize that or not. And so most people don't know what they don't know. And
Yeah.
most people don't know, like the word pivot sometimes can come off if you think about it, or if it comes to you, like it feels like a big deal, a big thing, a big change, right? And we don't like change. We're creatures of habits. But sometimes pivot is just the smallest thing,
Yeah.
right? That will combat the biggest panic, even. So that's what's so great about that. The small pivot versus the big panic. And it's like I would rather tweak things daily, which is a pivot, right? I'm not changing or reinventing something. I'm pivoting daily. Just like on airplanes, if they change 1 degree on their flight path, they're going to be on completely different sides of the map, right? Sites of the country or where their destination is. So you have to pivot, and sometimes you don't even realize the pivot you've made. It can be so small, but if you're in alignment, that's great, because then that way you don't have to have a coming to Jesus moment, right? I'd rather pivot daily than having a coming to Jesus moment later.
Yeah, yeah. And just as you was talking about the pivot, those small things, the word alignment. Okay, I was going to mention alignment. That's really those small pivots are really coming into alignment. And I was thinking, and that's a word God's using with me lately and everything. And I was thinking about how you go to a chiropractor. I've done that in my lifetime, and he didn't fix everything in one, it wasn't like I went one time and everything's fixed. No, he did some things, and then I came back, and he made those adjustments and everything, and then got things into alignment. And then it's kind of like your maintenance type thing. So no, good conversation today.
Yeah.
Um,
And isn't that funny with the chiropractors? I think about that often too. Like getting adjusted by a chiropractor. And that's why I talk about heart posture a lot, especially with my kids. Like when you go to the chiropractor and you're complaining about one specific pain, and then he doesn't adjust that one as much as something else somewhere else.
mhm.
And then when they adjust that other place that you didn't even think needed adjusted, that's
Yeah.
the one that's like, holy cow. And then also too, like then they start touching you. And then we sometimes don't even realize this is why pressure is so important and chips on our shoulder, because we don't realize the weight of the world that we carry and the what becomes the trigger points and what becomes the tension until someone else touches it. And those chiropractors, it's like, or if someone stretches you out, et cetera, it's like they'll barely touch you, and it's like you just are crumbling in pain. And then when the chiropractors adjust you to, what always gets me is that you can hear the adjustment, and you're like, holy cow! Like that's just always amazing. So it's funny that you bring up the chiropractor adjustment.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Um, I like to also ask my guests, knowing what you know now. So looking back over your life and everything, knowing what you know now and your walk with God and what all He's brought you through. And as you said, you just kind of walking, we're walking with Him, and He's with us. We don't always know it. But what encouragement or advice might you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, my encouragement would be kind of a one main theme, but a couple things with it. I love, like, we connected in a networking group,
Mhm.
and I love that you're a coach, you're a Christian coach, you've written a devotion, you're an author, a speaker, and there was a time in my life as an adult where, when it comes to timidity, right, these things would kind of intimidate me, and there was a moment when I was in brain rehab where I was being an advocate for myself as a young adult, and I was ready to, we'll say real world, but what I mean by that is I'd spent for about almost a year, 35 hours a week in brain rehab. And for me, I was fortunate that it was outpatient brain rehab and not inpatient. But a time that stood out to me, and this falls into like no weapon formed against me shall prosper. But at the time, I went to the case manager and I said, and this was pretty late into my rehab, and I said, I'm ready to go from 5 days a week, and I know I can do 2 days a week. So, and I've been mentioning this a lot lately this year in conversations because it's just relevant in the season I'm in. But the case manager said, "Thank you for for telling me that. The next time that we have a team meeting, we'll talk about it, we'll discuss it, and then we'll get back to you and let you know what we think." Well, that became a defining moment for me in a good way, because when she came back, she said, "Hey, the team and I talked, and we, we've agreed that we want you to step from 5 days a week in person to 4 days a week." And so I got very frustrated, and I want to emphasize the word frustrated because it affected me for the longest time, whether I knew it or not, right? We talk about the little things, and um, but I felt, when I didn't know this, and it was the distraction, I felt like I didn't have a seat at the table with a lot of people, because in that moment I spoke my truth. And when
Mhm.
she said the team and I will discuss, and she didn't include me, like I wasn't in the meeting, right? I wasn't in the room, and I'm the
Mhm.
patient. So, number one, I now can say this with absolute certainty that I have a father who's advocated for me. Therefore, I can advocate for myself and others. And now I'm so thankful to know that I have a seat at the table, right?
Mhm.
There's power in your presence, meaning the light. And I love networking with people. I love getting together and not competing, but collaborating with other authors and other coaches. And so the thing about it is now, for myself and teaching others, is that power in your presence, in your value, is that you have a seat at the table and use that right with your purpose. And so I'm so thankful for that lesson, to sit at the table now, but also that he has a table, and a seat saved for me. And I would encourage others with that. And that's just for my lesson for myself, but also
Right.
for others as well, that you have a seat at the table. So, sit down and collaborate with others and understand and have that value in yourself. Because at the end of the day, we're all leaders. And what leaders want to do is leaders want to lead with other leaders. So you have it a seat at the table, sit down, pull a chair up, and let's grow together.
Wow. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mm. And anything else? I don't want to, you feel like anything else that you want to share today before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I'll try to make this one quick. So this May we created what's called the Bold Brave Me, and we had 2 days of Christian speakers over 2 days, and I spoke on the second day, and it was at this church in Pittsburgh, and when I got to the church on it was May 9th and May 10th. When I got to the Impact Church on May 9th, I pulled in the parking lot, and when I looked up and saw the church, this was my amazing moment and God wink moment of the year. I realized that I had been at this church before. And this was in 2025. And several years ago, 2 years ago, I had gone to that church. And when I'd gone to that church one evening, it was to go and watch a concert. And one of my favorite Christian musicians was there. And while I was at the church, that concert, and I remember where I was sitting, the artist, his name was Danny Goki. Danny Goki it was very secluded, very, nice, and just a great night of worship music, but also fellowship. And so at one point he asked about testimonies. And there was a part of me that wanted to share my testimony that night, but I didn't. And I was like, why didn't I say something? Why didn't I share my testimony? And so I went in the parking lot and I was like, you know what? I'm never not going to share my testimony again. And 2 years later, that exact same church was the first church that I did my first keynote speaking engagement. So I went from not sharing my testimony to sharing it on stage at the exact same church. So
Wow.
that ties in that life's in the details. So that'd be, the last message I want to share with others is, don't be afraid to live in your purpose, and make sure you pivot, right?
Yeah.
So that'd be my final message for everyone.
That's awesome. That, yeah, I'm glad you shared that too, because that is awesome.
Thank
God
you.
works all things together, doesn't
He
he?
does.
He just does.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being here and sharing, like I said, so many things that, I was taking some notes. So if you saw me look down, that's what I was doing. I wasn't ignoring you. I was like, I gotta write
No,
that down. Even though I'll hear this again, it's like, no, I want to write that down right now. But I certainly appreciate that. And I always leave the audience, I always want to leave with the promise that comes in Isaiah 43:2. And that just says that when you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flames scorch you. And I like that because it says when, we know that there's going to be things that we will go through, but God is always with us. And so I would like to remind everybody that, if this episode has been encouraging to you, to please like it, share it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. And again, if you're feeling stuck, in your walk with God, then feel free to schedule um, a free call with me. And then of course, Ben's information will be all in the show notes as well. And Ben, again, thank you so much for being here. I certainly appreciate it, and I have been so enjoyed our time together.
thank you. I have as well, and thank you for sharing that verse. I like that. And before we even had our episode today, like you said, our first conversation that we chatted, I wrote down so many notes, and some of those notes that I wrote down kind of carried with me, and I shared some of the wisdom that you shared with me in our previous conversations as well. So thank you so much.
That's wonderful. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, until the next time, y'all have a wonderful day. Bye.